Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alamin. Wassalatu wassalamu ala ashrafil anbiya'i wal mursalin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wa hlul 'uqdatam min lisani yafqahu qawli. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and a very good afternoon. Welcome to our fourth series of conversations on the economy. This program is jointly organized by the Department of Economics, Center for Islamic Economics, and Bachelor of Economics Student Council. It is our great pleasure today to be having two prominent speakers, Tan Sri Datuk Dr. Kamal Salih, as well as Dr. Muhammed Abdul Khalid, to join our conversations on the economy today with a very interesting title, What Now, Malaysia, Getting Back on Track. I know that these two prominent speakers need no introduction, but for the record, allow me to read their brief biography. Okay? Tan Sri Datuk Dr. Kamal Salih graduated with a Bachelor of Arts Honours from Monash and PhD from University of Pennsylvania in 1973. He served University of Science Malaysia between 1973 to 1985 as a professor, Dean and Deputy Vice Chancellor, Academic. He was the founding Executive Director of Malaysian Institute of Economic Research, MIER, from 1986 to 1994. As a policy advisor, Tan Sri Kamal was a member of the Prime Minister's Economic Panel in 1981 until 1986, the Malaysian Business Council, 1991 until 1996, and acted as the Rapporteur General of the first National Economic Consultative Council, MARPEN 1, 1989 until 1991. In 1992, he established the first private medical college in Malaysia, the International Medical University, and remained its executive chairman until 2004. On retiring from IMU, Tan Sri Kamal served as economic advisor on the National Implementation Task Force in the Abdullah Badawi admin from 2006 until 2008. He was elected member of Parliament for Wangsa Maju from 1996 to 1999, and in 1996 he established Yayasan Wangsa Maju, now known as Yayasan Mahkota, and remains its chairman until now. Currently, Tan Sri Datuk Dr. Kamal Salih is the chairman of Malaysian Institute of Economics Research, MIER. For Dr. Muhammed Abdul Khalid, he's a well-known expert in poverty, inequality, mobility, and socio-economic development. Prior to founding DM Analytics, he was the Director of Research at Khazanah Research Institute, Head of Economics at Securities Commission Malaysia, and the Head of Social Policy at ISIS Malaysia. He has also held advisory and fellowship positions in UNDP Malaysia and Centris of University of Science Malaysia. He's also the author of the best-selling book, most of us have read it, The Color of Inequality, Ethnicity, Class, Income and Wealth in Malaysia. He holds a PhD and Master's degree of Public Affairs from Sciences, PO, France. Muhammad was previously appointed as the Economic Advisor to the Malaysia 7th Prime Minister in 2018, and he's currently the member of Board of Trustees, MIER. So our session today will be moderated by our Professor Muhammad Aslam Hanif. Of course, he needs no introduction also lah, So to you, Prof. Tafadhal.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you, Dr. Maya, for that introduction. You've already taken a good part of my duties that I need to do. So thank you very much. This is the third or the fourth conversation that we're organizing. I remember the one with Jomo, and then we had one with Musa, and then the third one was
economist from SKRI.
From KRI, and this is the fourth. So, and this is also coming to the end of our semester, at least the current semester. A very odd semester where we started face to face and went online, but we managed to carry on our conversation. That's a good thing. This series that we've been organizing, especially the series that has the word track on it, has got a long history. Dr. Muhammad will remember, because I think we invited him maybe 2+ years ago. The title was "Are We on Track?" And then I think the answer at that time was yes, we are on track. And then maybe a year later, are we still on track? And then his answer was, we are not on track. Yeah. Now this time, getting back on track means that there seems to be a consensus that we are off the track. Yeah? And therefore, we want to get back. So this track business is quite interesting. We've been talking about this. And I suppose we are looking forward to hearing from all the speakers about their views about the status of the economy and what are the strengths, what are the weaknesses, and how we can actually make the best of things. But I just want to add one more point before I call the speakers. 2020, was supposed to be the year that we achieved our Vision 2020. Right? It has been something that many Malaysians have been talking about for years. Right? I think a few years ago, we already knew that probably we were not going to achieve all the targets, or in fact, even the first target of high-income nation, for a variety of reasons. But this year, 2020, has also been a very eventful year. Maybe it's an understatement to say eventful. Right from January, February, we've had political changes in the country, and then COVID-19 with an incredible impact on everybody's lives. And I remember so many webinars and programs being organized talking about COVID-19 and its impact on the economy. And for the last maybe 1 or even 2 months, the focus has been about recovery. Right? I was listening to one of these programs very recently, and I remember the speaker was actually saying that any effort to try and talk about estimates and predictions about what's going to happen, especially if you start talking about 2021, is really very, very premature. And therefore, and she was saying that we just don't even know the facts yet. And economics, of course, is supposed to be based on hard data, and we don't have that data. So any talk about predictions, is a problem in economics, but even more so, I think now when we have this very complicated event. And just a couple of days ago, we are hearing on reports new cases of COVID-19. So we don't know whether this recovery is going to be, getting back on track, or another round of second wave, which some other countries have been experiencing. So I think it is this background that really makes it, even more interesting to hear what our two speakers have to say. Now, on their request, the way we're going to do this session today is Datuk Kamal will first come and make some maybe first round of his comments for about 10 to 15 minutes. Then we'll have Dr. Muhammed to have his session for about, again, 10 to 15 minutes. And then we'll open for some questions. I leave it to Dr. Maya to see how you want to maybe check the chat and see, intelligent questions being asked in the chat. Or even from the audience here, we do have about, 15 or so who are in the venue, and I think a few will come. And then we'll go for the second round. Again, we open for Q&A. All right, and then maybe some last words, if anything from them. Okay. So this is how we will do it. So with that in mind, Datuk Kamal Salih, well known to us, and now in his current position as the chairman of MIER. And even with MIER, alhamdulillah, we've had a very long, good relationship, even when Prof. Zakaria was there. So we look forward to hearing Datuk Kamal. The session is yours.
Thank you very much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. When you started talking about whether we are on track or not.
No, something has come up.
Sorry about that. The question is whether we are on track or how can we get on track as far as economic growth and development is concerned. I would say, first off, to kick off the discussion, we have been off track for a long time. The very fact that we cannot achieve Vision 2020 and the new government came in and extended it was with the very person who launched it, PM7, Tun Mahathir said that we are off track because we have to extend that vision to 2030. So we have been off track basically. And there is evidence to show that we are facing problems, even as during the time of the BN government with the introduction and implementation of the new economic model, which was meant to drive us and accelerate the process of achieving Vision 2020. Now we are facing a double whammy, the fact that we have still problems of structural reform that was intended with respect to the new economic model, whose three prongs include inclusive development, a high-income economy, which is the 2020 target per capita or nationally, and the third being sustainability. That model relies on maybe opening up the economy, allowing for market processes to lead, promoting private sector initiatives, and government were to take a much more facilitative backseat to driving the economy. Obviously, all those things didn't happen. The government still were the main driver. Even now, it's even worse because politics has reached a stage where our foreign investors are beginning to be concerned about where we are heading, and the political stability, the trust deficit of government, and the people having made a big choice to change the Malaysian national government were still stuck with promises in the manifesto that were not implemented. So for those reasons, we still remain off track, in other words. So what is, and now we got this second crisis, which has both a negative as well as a positive, depending on your perspective, of the impact of COVID-19 pandemic. We're still struggling with that. 4 stimulus packages, if you include the first one, it's now 5. The next one will be 6. In the current government's view, there were to be about 6 such stimulus packages to be implemented. They have implemented 4, and presumably with the current bill in Parliament for a supplementary budget to cover both, to get endorsement from Parliament from the first 4, is in fact the 5th stimulus package, which is going to be announced through the supplementary budget, I'm sure. So there was supposed to be 6, and I know this was supposed to be the decision taken because the choice of whether to have a big bang or to do the stimulus to fight against COVID by way of a more incremental phased approach. And I think the government adopted the second one. And it was a wise choice in that sense because then you can see the reaction. Obviously the target, and MIER has been monitoring it in the early stages of this COVID pandemic and its impact on the economy in terms of growth, in terms of employment impact, and the state of businesses, and of course the social capital, meaning the household economic situation. And our position is that, of course, we are facing this, and nobody is sure how it will become, or where it will end in terms of this pandemic. Right now, social distancing, personal hygiene, as well as using masks have become now even the US compulsory for some states. So that means this thing, until somebody, Oxford maybe, comes up, which they have already announced, they have something in terms of vaccine, we will not be sure whether we are out of it or not in terms of the pandemic crisis. But in our context, we did 3 studies on the impact of COVID. One just before announcement of the first stimulus by the by the PN government, and then subsequently after that. And in our last latest, we said that we will face a recession this year, and -3.6, and we'll recover in a V-shaped recovery to about 4.6% in 2021. In that context, I think most everybody agree on what the recession we are going to face, except maybe the level, there are some adjustments between Bank Negara and APU or Treasury. And of course, in terms of next year, people are saying we will get back on track because IMF and World Bank supports 4.25%, IMF was 7%. So even more optimistic that we'll get back on track. What is that track, basically? As far as the government is concerned, this new government is concerned, they are under Vision 2030. The growth objective is about 4.7, 4.9%, which many have said that whether you are talking about it in real terms or nominal terms, the end target will in fact be a shortfall and we will not achieve the developed status. But yesterday, the World Bank did say that we are now about 11,000 US per capita GDP, and then we will reach that 12,000 minimum standard for being part of the developed country club. Will be achieved probably even next year or the next 2 years. So they are very optimistic about getting back on track. We and also including Jomo and others are concerned that maybe that figure is not quite right, that you actually have to be doing something more like 6 to 7%. Our simulation is 7% you have to do over the next 10 years for you to really anchor or have a real traction to becoming a developed country. So that means that the strategy the model has to be adjusted accordingly. Not more of the same, or government knows best, government being the driver, will achieve that growth target. So a new model probably will need to be introduced, and is in long time coming. Because basically since 2000, inequality has been intractable. We studied for UNDP together with Muhammed and Leon to show that in fact for the last before the announcement that GDP had dropped by to 0.39, actually we were saying that that figure might be artificial, that the inequality was in fact still remaining at about 4.4 or 4.1. And now with COVID, apparently the Stats Department has announced that the inequality has gone back to 2.4 at least. So if that is not contained, or new inclusive strategies are implemented, which was outlined in some of the documentation relating to SPV 2030, we see that is an issue that still will be with us over the next 4 or 5 years before we really see real convergence of incomes. But the other part is of course real wages. Real wages has been stagnant while cost of living has been going up. Even if we call CPI has been stable at about 3.5, now in fact we are facing a deflationary situation. That inflation figure might even come down further. And the issues of how to deal with a deflationary environment is quite crucial, and demand management is more crucial than even supply condition. The reason why we think that growth can jump back in a V shape is because that has been the case of all previous recessions, 4 recessions we had. And that's because basically the issue is not a supply problem. If the demand turns back to be positive, world growth, world trade improves, we can easily come back in a V shape. But with COVID, there is a possibility of a second resurgence if the SOPs are not compliant, 100%, 120%. And if, for instance, the vaccine is still not on the market, then we are maybe seeing not a V shape, but almost a bit of an L shape before it comes back to a U shape kind of growth path. Because basically also besides inequality, besides the fact that we have wage stagnant, or the wages are stagnant, and there is some accusation now that there's a return of wage suppression. In a sense, trying to sort of keep our competitiveness to foreign investment still open and take advantage of the relocation out of China or some of the from Europe and so on after Brexit. But the point is still that there's lack of confidence. Many, and we have been tracking in MIER about the kind of foreign investment that are waiting to come in. We estimated about something like 300 billion US worth of investments in various sectors are still out there to see what is happening to the government. So I can summarize to say that basically we are off track because for the last few years, politics has been determining our economics progress. And decisions taken by the government has become, on balance, have a net effect on the economy. And so a new model is required. And we have been saying, Jomo, Salih, Raja Russia, that the country since 2000 has been deindustrializing. I think 2 more minutes. Has been deindustrializing. If you look at value added in the manufacturing sector, you take into account the number of establishments in this manufacturing sector as well as employment. In terms of value added, we are now at one time contributing about 35% to GDP. Now the sector is only contributing about 25 or even 21%, depending on how you measure it. A good measure or a good description or narrative is you read Sultan Nazlim's book, his second book, particularly documents the progress through the various 5 Malaysia plans and so on. He's got some interesting statistics on the industrialization. And he also questioned that if there has to be any regeneration of the economy, you have to reverse this deindustrialization process. In other words, the IMP4 must incorporate into new incentives, new policies to try and promote technology-based industrialization, particularly to improve productivity. Both not just in the manufacturing sector, but also in the agricultural sector. And that's why we're also talking about new agricultural technologies to turn the agricultural sector, which Pala tried to do, but mainly only managed to get the idea of agribusiness into the lexicon or policy for agriculture. But now we are concerned about food security, and that's become now new mantra of government, and the need to establish a food stockpile. That's one of the major projects MIER is promoting. What MIER has done, and I'll conclude on this, is that in this so-called reindustrialization plan, which is the new model, so to speak. Of course, with that, you have to match also with the issue of maintaining price stability and ensuring that distribution of income will improve economically. The only way that can improve, and we did present in the UNDP Human Resource Development Report, a new paradigm which says that basically the capability or fiscal capability of a household can be split into four sections. I did present it once, I think. And that is that you can earn passive income from wealth ownership. That can come to rent, to dividend, you own shares, financial instruments, whatever. Even also high skills, for instance, is an asset and that can be converted to income. The second component is your wages and salaries, including maybe more bonuses, which must be after tax, because the tax part goes into the third component, which is subsidies, which is financed by your taxes, basically. And the fourth category is credit. And all of these, credit, for instance, is not that much available to small and medium scale. And of course, whatever borrowing they now have, including some of the corporate side, at least the loan moratorium is helping them before some of them could think of. So basically, the recession is due to closure of businesses, the vulnerable ones. Now, but with this lockdown coming, presumably will end end of August next month. But with the second surge possibility, that may be even extended again. Because we recommended opening up much earlier, but in a phased way, so that businesses can come back into play. So basically, we introduced what is called a Crouching Tiger initiative. And the tiger means that we are approaching or want to become the 5th Asian tiger. But at the same time, for tiger means something else for us and more special. It stands for technology-based industrialization for growth and economic restructuring. That's tiger. So that's the tiger. And we identified in this strategy, just 1 minute more, 7 key technologies that will drive the economy forward, particularly in terms of the introduction of 5G. Now we are talking about 6G. And this will allow for the expansion of the digital economy. And the digital economy currently contributes about 16% to the current economy. We did a study for MCMC, and we are doing a second round for verticals on the sectoral impact. But in our projection, if you have the right investment levels and the right technology you introduce, especially by 6G, then the contribution of the digital economy can go as high as 20 to 30%. So that is a major, and that means that all the way we do work, we manufacture, we buy things, and we have leisure and so on, are already being transformed by COVID with the MCOs showing us that we go online more than we did before. And so because of that, that will define quite a lot of how things will go forward. Under that, the others are autonomous cars, the high-speed freight train, Hyperloop. We talk about new agriculture and agrodome technologies. We included the promotion of the hydrogen economy, which is based on solid-state hydrogen and biojet fuel for renewable energy and so on. So these are, and lastly, we also have a breakthrough in terms of financial technology because of the possibility of digital payment systems, as well as maybe some by China digital currencies. We have a particular solution which we call DAB, DHAB, standing for Dinar Holdings Assurance Bureau, which allows for us to use there are 3 components, one of which is in fact to broaden the notion of the halal market, which is an international market that is expanding to something like it's called either Muslim-friendly halal market. There's a platform called Medina, which will be announced in November in the WEIF meeting here for launching in Kamal meeting of the WEIF next year. And then this is to enclose not just pure halal, which is a controversial thing because there are many halal standards, is to turn it into make it more inclusive into what is called deemed halal. The fact that you're using your currency now you pay by ringgit in notes, that is already not halal. That's not halal compliant because it's fiat. That money is not backed by currency, by assets. So the new model requires that you also create a means to convert assets into cash flow through electronic means, blockchain or whatever technology, and digital banking, and then a digital payment system. So plus our investments in, or promoting investments in new industries through the Tiger initiative, Tiger initiative. We hope next year will stimulate the economy back to on track. And we're going to launch this sometime in September. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kamal. Very comprehensive take on the economy, touching on so many different aspects. And just to mention some of the main points, we have been off track. So the idea of getting back on track is very important. We have had a slower growth rate, which already meant that we would not be able to achieve Vision 2020 in the year it was supposed to be. But now the challenge will be how to increase the growth rate from what it has been for the last maybe 20 years, which is around 5%. If you're just talking about numbers, so this is just the numbers part of developed status. Yeah. But then also mentioned was the issues of inequality that we have to give attention to. And if I can also just comment, the fact that we just recently announced the new poverty line income, which is more than 100% higher than what it was. I think it just tells you that the few academics who were always, attending seminars and saying that 980 ringgit didn't make sense. It didn't make sense, right? So you have more than 100% increase in that poverty line income. What is that going to do to wages? Because I think even in our group, some of our lecturers sent WhatsApps. Students are saying that when they graduate, if they're not paid 2,208 ringgit, they would be paid a salary below the poverty line if they were a single household. So this is going to have impact on this real wages issue. So it's not a straightforward thing. V-case recovery in many previous cases, but this time we're not sure. Could be a U shape. Yeah. And therefore a new model is required. I'm sure maybe in the second round we may have more discussion of what that new model is, but certainly it involves what is called the crouching tiger term, technology-based industrialization for growth and economic restructuring. Yeah, so that's the model that's been put forward by MIER, where manufacturing plays an important role, or should play getting back on track for manufacturing as well. But this time also to include agriculture, especially with the use of technology in these areas. And for that, we need a whole separate discussion. So, coming to Dr. Muhammad, of course, we were discussing before the session, and you want to maybe discuss some of the non-quantitative issues. I'm not sure if I got that correct. So you may be touching on these issues about how to get back on track and what are the areas that maybe you see as our major challenges and your ideas about this. So, Dr. Muhammad, the floor is yours.
Terima kasih, Prof. Hassan. Maybe I answer English. Okay. Maybe I answer the question first. What now Malaysia getting back on track? We assuming the train is still on track. The train akan kembali ke rumah. Joke aside, I think that's where we are. It's not that we are in the wrong track, but even we risk losing the train altogether. And I explain why do I say that. Like Prof. Aslam and Kamal said, this is unprecedented. And OECD did a report last month, I think in early June. It says that even though there could be a recovery, slower than anticipated, the socio-economic condition or standard of living going to be equivalent to pre-COVID, less than pre-COVID. So even if we recover, we're not going to be living as standard of living as the same pre-COVID. Not just for global economy, but also Malaysia. If you calculate now, if you assume GDP 95, ringgit about 4.55% against US dollar depreciation, our GDP per capita is about the year of 2012. So it's already pushed back. Even during the Asian financial crisis, 1997, 1990, 1998, 1999 recover, but not only until 2002 that GDP reached back post Asian financial crisis. So it takes a few years to recover. And few years to recover is not just in terms of figures, there's impact on lives. So it's going to be very, very challenging. And to recover, for us to help the vulnerable groups in particular, to ensure that it's equitable, to ensure that it's inclusive, there must be some fiscal room. When the growth is a challenge, fiscal also going to be a challenge. And when you look globally, global economy going to be much tougher to recover. major economies. World Bank projection for global economy, they expect global economy to shrink by about 5.2%. Poverty, 70 to 100 million will be in poverty. And I explained this for Malaysia. So globally, we expect there will be no growth, negative effect, and a lot of people are going to be poor. Then if you slice it, this on global growth, the biggest economy in the world is America. America already in recession, but worse, they are also consumers. The big consumers of our products are the economies. Now in America, 1 in 4 of those in the labor market are already on unemployment benefits. That's unprecedented, not even during global crisis in 1928 to 1929. 1 in 4 in crisis, and they're still not yet recovering. You'll be hearing cases. So the biggest economy in the world, the biggest engine, the engine is not working. And they're also one of our biggest trading partners. UK economy. UK economy in May compared to April shrink by 20%. Also not doing well. Europe also negative. China, one of our biggest partner, the first quarter it dropped by about 7%. Never in their history dropped as much as 7%. And last month during Chinese Party Congress, the annual Party Congress, they said we're not going to have GDP targets anymore. We're going to have different targets. And the target is only 2. Stability and poverty eradication. Stability is the most important. And that I would revisit the stability factor later in my speak. Without stability, you will not have growth. And they focus on that. So China also, America not doing well, Europe not doing well, China also not doing well. Even look at our neighbor in Singapore. A lot of our products go there, either import or exports. Second quarter, year-on-year drop by 12%. Our figure for Q2, World Bank expected Q2 to be down by -10. And you have to remember, during when COVID started, Minister of Finance or Bank said, maybe we drop, or World Bank will drop by -2. That one can tolak tepi. It's already in the long count. It's going to be much worse. And we haven't seen either we recovering or not. Malaysia to relax, pakai gelang ni pun masuk boleh dimakan lagi. So the recovery is not inside, globally not doing well. Big economies also not doing well. So that is the challenge on growth, and we are struggling. The biggest or direct impact on this weakening growth is on employment. There's a data done, if you look at the data released by Department of Statistics, the unemployment figure went up, but if you compare those between January to May, the number of unemployed in Malaysia up by 61%. This is worse than 2008 financial crisis and 1998 Asian financial crisis. We never seen this kind of number. And the worst, if you slice that, the unemployment rate, actually people like you, the youth. And we have a problem with youth unemployment, it's going to go up now by 11%. Not just youth unemployment, and you have an issue of youth underemployment. Now I think 20%, 40% of those graduates are working in low-skilled jobs. So people say, you graduate memilih. If graduate memilih, 60% of them will not work in low-skilled jobs. Majority works in mid-skilled jobs, even though you are graduate. So there's going to be a challenge. Not only there's no wage growth for graduate pre-COVID, now with COVID, with excess of supply, there's no demand. Wage suppression, like Aslam said, is going to be a challenge. So jobs going to be an issue. It already become an issue. Unemployment rate now 5.3%. Even during 5.3%, to put in context, Asian financial crisis we only 3.7%. That hit us the most, but now it's much bigger. Jobs is a challenge, a direct impact. Jobs street calculation based on the data, they say about 20% have a problem in finding jobs. If you translate that loss of jobs to poverty. Department of Statistics released household income survey last week, last week, 2 weeks ago. The poverty rate, 2019 was 5.6%. This is pre-COVID. With COVID, the number should be higher. We increased poverty line from 2002 to 2,900, increase of 700. Sorry, from 980 to 2002. 2002 is the average poverty line for size family household size of 4. Not graduate. So the poverty line kurang. That's on average. 2002 poverty rate is 5.6. Now, if we increase it just by 700 ringgit from 2002 to 2009, poverty rate will increase from 5.6% to 17%. Put it another way, if you lose 700 bucks, poverty rate will increase by 11%. That equivalent of 800,000 households. You can impact 2.4 million people in Malaysia. That's how vulnerable we are. And the number that I mentioned, all pre-COVID. If you add pre-COVID, it's going to be much, much worse. And we are already vulnerable. So kita baik tapi nak balik lah. Saya ingat, among those vulnerable, the most vulnerable of vulnerable are self-employed. No, Congress. Senang cerita, Makcik Kia. Makcik Kia is self-employed. Jual burger self-employed, belajar sendiri self-employed. Makcik Kia. Apa jadi dia, kita tak tahu dah. Daripada lupa orang. Dan ini jadi Datuk Lim lah. I'm going to choose my word again very carefully. No need, that's right. We did a study which we're gonna release next month. We hope by first or second week. We look at the most vulnerable in care. How many of them are protected? In Malaysia, about 40% to 50% are not protected by either EPF or SOSO. And if you lose your job, how many of those are protected? In our sample, if you're a woman, head of household, you work, if you lose your job, 70% to 80% have no protection. And these people have no savings. This was before a lot of cases of pajak gadai. Polis kena pajak. And this has impact not only to that household, but in particular to children. We have 500,000 children who are on the meal program. They are not in school, they do not have that meal. And we already have issues of malnutrition. In fact, the latest figure that they released last month, 2 months ago, the number of stunting in Malaysia actually went up, did not go down. So the number that we mentioned earlier, the global numbers, GDP, it reduced, it has impact. And it has impact to the most vulnerable. The next step then, the question will be, what do we do, or have we done enough? I can categorically say we haven't done enough. If you compare on, as we mentioned, stimulus package, Prof. Aslam also mentioned stimulus package. Mulai dari Prihatin Plus, for SME, and then Rencana. We spent about 35 to 45 billion. As a percentage of GDP, we are among the lowest in the Asian countries. Singapore spent fiscal spending 4 times higher than us. Thailand spent double than us. We do not spend. We spent too much care only one time. She doesn't get any assistance, except that one time. And they are the most vulnerable. And you need much care to generate the economy. Poor people have economic students here, marginal propensity to consume is much higher among the low income. And when they have no money, who's going to spend? And the implication of this, not just poverty goes up, you're going to have social instability when inequality widened. Between 2016 to 2019, inequality went up. Inequality has been on the downward trend since 2004. Always. Inequality come down. 2016 to 2018, it went up. This pre-COVID. with COVID, you look what happened in the stock market has been going up. There's going to be a gap between the rich and the poor that will widen. In 2016, 2019, we also know the growth, household income growth of the B40 is the slowest compared to M40 and top 20. That's why you remember when we do the Human Development Report, we see that we improve inequality because B40 income grew much faster than other groups. Pre-COVID, 2016, 2019, they're the smallest. Now with COVID, with a lot of them losing their job, no savings, you can expect what inequality is going to look like. This is going to pose a challenge to social stability and political stability. Then what should we do? I think I will stop here and take questions. Maybe in the next round we can answer that.
Thank you very much, Muhammed, for the focus on maybe the although it's the qualitative areas, but you gave a lot of figures in those discussions. For example, the source of growth of Malaysia coming from outside, because we are an export nation, is not going to be there. Right? So that's going to be a challenge in itself. All our trading partners also facing problems, so this will be a challenge to us. Employment, major issue, because we do have a huge number of, it's not mentioned by both of you, a huge number of migrant workers, and a huge number of those are undocumented. So that's another major challenge when you talk about wages and the need to increase real wages. How are you going to do that? And of course, when you talk about employment, youth unemployment, major problem. Not only unemployment, but underemployment. And maybe if I just add one more point, from some of the reports from KRI, it seems that despite the fact that we are churning out more and more graduates, the jobs that are being created are jobs that are low and medium, low skill jobs. Right? So that means there is certainly a structural problem in what is being demanded and what we are supplying. And then of course when you talk about poverty rate, 5.6% at the moment with this recent revision of PLI, and if we just increased it by 700 ringgit, this will move and jump to 70%, quite a worrying figure. Right? And then the last point again about vulnerabilities, almost half of our workers are not having any kind of social protection in terms of, and even those who are having, is it enough? I think that's another major. I think if I'm not mistaken, a few years ago, EPF speaker was saying maybe up to even 60 to 70% of our workers don't really have enough funding for retirement. Right? So this is a major point. I think a recent study that people are quoting from Prof. Fatima Kari about 80% of our retirees will not have enough to see them through using a multi-dimensional aspect. So these are all worrying trends. Okay, so we heard the first round. So we got a few minutes, maybe 5 minutes or so or maybe 10 minutes for some questions. Anybody here? I see. Okay, so let's very quickly we go with Dr. Naha first, and then one, and please be precise.
Thank you, Professor, and thank you to Tan Sri and Dr. Muhammad for the interesting introduction to the topic. What I gather from the discussion so far is the concern among economists about managing the downside risk of the economy. And people now don't really talk about how to improve the upside gain for whatever resources that we have. At the same time, there is also the issue where we don't talk about economic efficiency much anymore. We talk about how to improve our economic resilience. And both of you have given a very gloomy picture of the future. Yet I want to ask from both of you if there is strength that we still have, and what are those strengths? and how we can improve on that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good day. It will be wonderful second round, I'm sure, right? That you have one, please be straight to the point.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you to Prof. Lam. And also to all of our guests, honorable guests today, Tansi Kamal Salih and also Datuk Khalid. I have two questions. Any one of you can answer my questions. First, my question is about GST. So it's a little bit old question, but still not people able to give me a clear picture. Do you think that we should introduce, because it is easy for us to discuss this distribution part, but we have to be practical, right? Means that some economists believe or want us to maintain 51% in the public debt to the GDP. Some say that during COVID, no, we should be relaxed and having more collections of the tax. So in the future, maybe next year, should we introduce the tax because you cannot make money out of thin air, right? And or maybe you guys want to introduce just 3% at minimum level first, and later can increase that to 6%. I don't know, I'm not sure. And my second question is about our business cycle theory about the recession. Previously, we have like 10-year cycle of recession, and it's not a solid theory, but then people still believe it, and it surely happened, and it does happen for this year as well, as those people predict. But this year is a little bit different because it is because of the non-economic factor. It is COVID, it just of nowhere, and then it affects us globally. The whole globe, the whole world is now having a recession. So the theory basically stands true, but the factor are actually not correct. But for this time, one of the, I think IMF already predicted this kind of recession, he said, but not for the factor of COVID. They mentioned that it is because the global corporate debt is too high, that lots of companies actually don't realize that they cannot pay if anything happens. Now we have COVID already happened, and how about those companies, how they want to pay their debt? So is it?
Okay, what? So your question is about the business cycle, right? What is your view on the business cycle? Okay, so would you like to ask, or is there any other question? We can just collect maybe one more question. If not, then
thank you very much. Those questions are quite important because the way we get out of this or get on track or this current crisis that we are going through requires a deeper understanding or interplay between economics and to understand politics. But because of the social impact that has been outlined by Dr. Muhammed, it's clearly that going forward, we always have to, which is also part of our policy stance, even from the days of 1970s and so on, the NEP, that basically you have to talk about growth and income distribution, and you slice the income distribution part into horizontal equity as well as the inequality between income groups. That has always been with us. That is our challenge to become a developed country. And in the Vision 2020, all of these are classified or further sliced into the 9 challenges of the Vision 2020. Of course, the new Vision 2030 has even more slices into the picture, and they talk about the 3 major goals, 17 strategies, and any number of so-called enablers in order to achieve that target. The simple fact is that we are now facing, both because of the structural changes that were reform that were necessary to bring us to a higher growth path, has not been implemented, and World Bank, IMF has always been saying that we need to go into this, and they've been postponing for various reasons. And for me, it is more for non-economic reasons. That's on the growth side, and that the model that we were working on was basically to do with what are the new sources of growth that can we bring in. Unfortunately, over the last 20 years, there has been no structural change. There has been no new industrial initiatives. And in fact, the decline of productivity in almost all sectors, including services, we are now, in fact, still on that so-called downtrend insofar as growth potential is concerned. We have a bit diagram, but there's no chance to show it here. It doesn't matter.
Do we have stands? That was
Okay, the issue of
we have stands.
well, we do have the strength. We do have good monetary management. We have been spending in order to achieve, to maintain growth, at the same time to distribute that of growth. The strength has been reflected in basically the fact that when you go into a recession over the last 10 years or 20 or even 30 years, that we have been able to recover. That reflects in a V-shaped form. That reflects our strength. If you were in fact devastated by such a recession, which is, as you're right, is a building cycle effect of 10 to 12 years, which we monitored from the early 80s, is the case. You can of course link that to the fact that this cycle, come back to also the business cycle and so on. But what we are now faced with is not supply issues, but actually demand side issues. So our strength on the supply side is there, except maybe in terms of human capital, the mismatch of skills into the new industrialization that is required, which is technology based. But the demand has been deficient. So when you discuss about world recession because of COVID, even the story of COVID and this pandemic is linked to the economic cycle of the world. There's a professor, I can't remember his name, Potts or something from Oxford University that linked the cycle world growth cycle to the pandemic cycle. There's a whole theory on that. You can read, you can Google the world growth cycles and the pandemic cycle. You see that they have a framework that can understand, that explains why this is the case. In terms of structural and demand factors, of course, the debt overhang is very critical. And we have a debt problem here. In Malaysia, one of our weaknesses, not strength, is the fact that household debt is very high, in excess of 80%, 87%, some say. In the case of the deficit, we have been in deficit, government deficit for a few, nearly more than 10 years, and maybe 20 years, I would say. So those are our vulnerabilities, but we are able to maintain our fundamental strength in terms of the traditional model of being a primary exporting and export-led model of growth. So I think it's there, but the weakness, and we're talking about strength, the weakness is in fact on the demand side. And in this current down cycle, you know, the traditional Keynesian theory says that when there is a government deficit, there was low demand for government spending and expenditure. There's a household expenditure because of the inequalities and also the effect of the poverty and so on. Household income, household debt is improving, and therefore they cannot, in this case, spend enough. And of course, the world growth, we are export-led, and exports are in depression. So how to then stimulate the economy on the demand side? Keynesian theory just merely say that you go into deficit spending. Your government must step in and invest. And we have done some calculations. If, for instance, we are able to inject about over and above the government stimulus, over now 75 billion, our target was 95 billion, that was still about 35 or 20 billion short. If you inject some kind of public works investment infrastructure plus some relocating of investments and so on, we injected something like another. Now we are working on 130 billion. Previously, we did on 80 billion of new investment, both through infrastructure, housing, as well as supporting new industries.
But this is not through private sector. This is
through private sector.
This is through private sector.
As basically, you can raise next year's projected from 4.6%, which is our forecast, by an additional 2%. So you can reach that.
This is your deficit. I mean, you have
our approach. For instance, if at least 20%, we take in 20% of what the government has introduced by way of deferments and subsidies and so on, but real cash injection, you need something like 130 billion more of investment in order to bring back the growth rate and the recovery. And that's one aspect of it. Then the others are how to deal with household income and so on. On the cycle, I just said that basically we were already reading the cycle based on the fact that there was a theory also that was proven quite right. When the yield curve inverted, then you have 18 months before recession hits you. The yield curve inverted globally 20 months ago. So in other words, we are in fact already ready for a recession, even before COVID. COVID just make it worse. I'll come back again on the question.
Okay, thank you very much. Muhammad, one of the three questions, the GST thing has not been. I don't know whether you want to take it up or you can maybe give your own views on the other questions.
I think.
Do you want to answer first?
I thought yes, you go ahead and talk.
Okay. Now a question on strong points. On the strong points. Yes, we have some strong points. We can spend and we should spend, but we're not spending the way for the government. We are still concerned on the fiscal rule. Fiscal rule should be out of the window when people's lives at stake. There's no point. Dead people do not consume, so there's no point having a lot of dead people. Government can spend and should spend. You look at Singapore has increased spending. We haven't. We still think we're constrained by the limit, by the debt limit. Yeah.
So you're talking about the 55%.
Yeah, we should spend more, but we don't use it. But the bigger challenge, our economy is mostly domestic. Domestic demand, consumer generate growth from the consumer side. There also investment side, and 40% of our investment come from foreigners. And you want people to spend, they need to have confidence. The confidence will be better. The economy better, job market can be better. If there's no confidence, either from domestic side or foreign side, then it's going to be a challenge. And the confidence is not there because we do not have political stability. You cannot divorce economy from politics. If there's no political stability, if rule of law is being questioned, rich can get away, pakai suit, pakai tie, be caught. The poor in orange jumper, purple jumper, rule of law not respected, where are you going to get confidence? Unless and until you solve that political stability, strengthening rule of law and institutions, it's very difficult to have sustainable growth. So whatever strong points that you have, it doesn't matter.
GST
So the
question.
GST, I had come up before to say that we should introduce the GST for the next budget, and I proposed about 3%. Basically, when the GST was being considered, my own recommendation to review that, or my own suggestion was just you should just zero-rise it, don't abolish it. Well, the government has spent millions of dollars, and businesses have responded, and the registration and even the what you call rebate system were already in place, although the implementation was because there was a government crisis. But the PH government still insisted on abolishing it. The reason is because you bring back SST, you can only right now have still a gap of about 20 billion in terms of tax revenues, in this case, direct tax. So how do you plug that? And GST or SST just could not replace that. That's one aspect in the fiscal aspect. The other aspect is the linkages. The GST identified every sector, every enterprise, and the legal backing of the foreign for compliance issues is quite strong and in place. Yet, when you introduce the SST, the underground economy, which is now about 20% of GDP, can get away with murder. And on top of that, when you go on to digital banking in the future, all settlements are now for even tourists coming from China to come to Malaysia. Settlements are paid, not here, they are paid outside, in China. They go into a Chinese owned country, like the Japanese used to do. Japanese own hotels, they use their own airlines and so on. But Now when it's more open, there's a lot of leakage based on this digital settlement system. Alibaba, Union Pay, Alipay, or whatever, all of these, WeChat, all these payment systems, WeChat actually is a major outflow. So this is why we got fundamental strength. We can support 6 million foreign workers. That's a measure of our strength. Of course, they are, but those jobs the Malaysians don't want. The reason why we have unemployment is because there's a choice that was deliberately been made. But because there are no new high wages or paying salaries, they had to take take up jobs that are not their levels of skills or training for sure. And then the gig economy kicked in, which is a part of the way in which the things work. So even when there's MCO, we still can sustain some kind of welfare level. People start buying online, they do cook their own food and so on. But those are all leading to lack of demand, to a lowering of demand. And that is what is the problem. Our weakness at the moment is how to increase demand, how to get people to spend, how private sector must invest. And the private sector, domestic private sector, are basically only concerned about plantations and property. They are not going into new industries. Top Glove becomes the top 500 company now, a top 50 company in the world, because it was already a traditional technology, and we have got rubber. The other strength is, of course, that basically, in terms of raising financing the deficit, now instead of just 3.6, which was the target for the previous government, is now, the finance minister also admitted, is now going to be about 6%. So how to finance that deficit is a key. So basically, we can still borrow domestically, and that's one of our strengths. That is, there is at least about 100 billion worth of liquidity that can be mopped up to finance this deficit. It just government send more bonds, basically. And that's where the problem of the limit on 50%. And many people, Salih as well as Muhammed, is saying that should, and I also recently did a meeting with the Prime Minister and the Economy President and Muhammed President. He said that you've got to throw away macroeconomic management as usual, must be thrown away. You have to be more creative. And Keynes has provided some of those already as solutions. Go for it. So now they're talking about 6% and it's supplementary. Just to put on and my response to this question is that, and in the comeback, we will introduce something on the solution side. We have provided the government with a solution. We have provided the government with the means to solve not just the financing of the 6% from a monthly point of view, but also to undertake some of the major public works that's necessary in a Keynesian style fiscal policy. You will throw away monetary policy. Under those circumstances, monetary policy is not necessarily not going to be as effective. Even if you bring down the OPR to 1.5%, the West have done that. So we are in a sense in a liquidity preference problem. People are even saving now. They are not spending. Even though there are middle income, they are saving. That's why they have got this liquidity in the financial system. So monetary policy, many writers have already, economists have said it is fiscal policy that will kick off and regenerate the growth rate. And so we have provided a fiscal solution to the Prime Minister, in fact, and he's waiting for his response.
Thank you. That's true. So we need an injection to bring the demand back, quite a huge amount, talking about another 130 billion figure. And this is through fiscal policy, and maybe that's why at this time budget will be interesting to see what happens. And of course, everybody seems to have not talked about this, the 12 Malaysia plan, which is supposed to be the blueprint for the next 5 years. I was told it's been postponed a little bit. Maybe they are doing these adjustments in order to take into the latest developments. But November will be there. Okay, we presented. Okay, Dr. Maya, we do have some. I can't read that. Unless there's some way to make it larger.
Yeah, I tried to make it much larger, but I think it won't be readable from here as well. So I'll just read some of the questions. And perhaps the first question have been taken somehow by Sri, but I just read it out loud. Dr. Muhammad mentioned about Malaysia among lowest fiscal spending for COVID stimulus. MIER also mentioned that the needs for more fiscal spending. My question, show me the money. Where do we get the money to increase the fiscal spending? Modern monetary theory, tax. So how do we then even balance this with the issue of national debt that was said to be 1 trillion during the previous government, and our effect to future generation to shoulder this debt? So that's the first question. Yes, please, Sri.
You print money. In a recession, countries have printed money. And we have given a solution to the government to print money. And we have the asset to back that, because you cannot print money without it. You only have to watch out for the inflationary impact on the economy. But it is an addition to money supply, M1. Simple, basic 101 economics. You print money. Governments have done it all in the last 60 years since the war. All the money that you're getting now, the US have been printing it. Obama printed for top 700 million. You issue the bond, but you don't even have to issue the bond, because when Negara has the ability, if you are given some asset, and if you invest, you can print more money than what you have right now. The solution is print money.
What asset?
What asset?
Yes, what asset are you talking about?
When you print, what is the asset?
What is the asset that you have?
There are countries overseas who are willing to lend you money or lend you gold bars, which was done years ago. 300 tons of gold were lent to Malaysia. You print the money and you pay back that gold. Then the rest of the money after your payment of that gold, you can expand. It is part of your M1. There's no debt, no effect on the debt.
You are lending, you are borrowing the money, and
We're
you are
not.
going to print the money from borrowed money.
No,
You're not talking about assets that
you're borrowing the asset.
Okay. Yeah, you're borrowing the asset from someone else. It's not
Yeah,
asset.
but then you pay back. You return back. You have a third-party lending. You will give your land to a friend who is now going to go bankrupt. He doesn't pay his loan. Once his country develops, he can pay back that loan. But in this case, you can borrow that asset without paying interest even. But there's a return on the fact that maybe a 20% cost on the asset after you have printed the money, and you pay back that asset from the printed money. We have the funds. We have the means. We have shown it to the Prime Minister. So now it's up to that. It's in his court right now to fund that project. And this will not just finance the 6% deficit. It will also finance the development plans. And many countries are having this opportunity. We came through the UN, who came to us, said that, okay, this is what was instructed, the humanitarian funds. Now you make it available. They are making it available to 82 countries. And I'm involved in the Malaysian case. They came through MIER. I'm also involved in the Laotian case and possibly the Indonesian case to finance this. So it is in the government's court. Now I put it out. Put with some pressure on the
first time I think, at least I'm hearing about this. Is very interesting idea about what is this plan. But we need to maybe have more separate discussion to talk. Is there another?
We have quite a lot of questions here. On PLI, Malaysia has announced a new poverty line income, which is 2,208, but now the minimum wage is only 1,200, meaning that the current minimum wage is not able to support the cost of living. My question, is it a good move to increase the current minimum wage in order to enable people to support the living? The next question is on foreign workers. Malaysia has taken strict action against foreign workers, but currently in the real field, a large number of industries, several businesses are facing lack of workers problem. How does Malaysia is planning to recover this issue? Then the second question, Malaysia was earning a big amount of money from tourism and education industry. Currently, due to several social issues, immigration issues, no jobs after graduation, high rates of increase of tuition fees, etc., Malaysia is losing a large number of foreign students and brains as well. How does Malaysia is planning to face it in the near future? Banyak ini.
No, I think
I
we just
think apa
take this
dia-
first and then.
Ah, yes, okay.
Maybe.
PLI, since PLI is increased, should minimum wage increase. So since PLI now is 2002, should minimum wage also be 2002. PLI is not equal to minimum wage. There's an average household size of Malaysia. PLI we do not have. We already asked the Trustees what is the PLI for single individual berbujang. It's different than family of 4, different than family of 5, different than those in Sabah, different than those in Kelantan. It doesn't mean that if PLI for households have 4, your minimum wage has to be 2002 also. Minimum wage should not just talk about minimum wage and PLI. It should be minimum wage and living wage. What should be the living wage instead, rather than what should be the PLI. I think that's a confusion that needs to be clarified.
Second one is about the foreign workers and maybe wants to.
Actually, Dr. Nung has addressed this during his talk here. He talked about foreign workers.
Really?
Yes.
Is that all right?
Foreign workers, we spoke about this, or it's been discussed since 1990, during 1990s, we said we're going to reduce it, but it's been going up. And I think today we do not know how many foreign workers we have. We need foreign workers, of course we need foreign workers. We cannot deny their contribution. They also contribute to growth and to the development. The issue is on the, this is also sensitive, it's also the mistreatment of foreign workers. You need foreign.
Can I ask one question?
Choosing his words.
Yeah. Al Jazeera got into trouble because of this. Which is true. We did not treat them well. Before we said okay for it. And there's a high cost if you don't treat them well. Look at Singapore. Singapore managed to contain the COVID so well, but they ignore foreigners. They ignore the migrants. Because they ignore the migrants, the numbers might count. You cannot exclude non-citizens in the same country. Same what we're doing here. Before we said it's okay, we test you. Then we say the employer has to pay. Employer doesn't have to pay for the employee. If foreign workers have COVID, we are immune. No, we're not immune. Treatment of foreign workers has to be proven. That's the biggest issue.
We've been trying to the issue of foreign workers has been talked about to try to reduce it since Palang and I was there as well. And that was by way of higher penalties, more for employers to bring foreign workers. But you know the reason is much more than that because of the political games that people play in respect of, essentially the issue of human trafficking is a big issue. We are benefiting from bringing more important foreign workers, and we are trying to reduce it because of political issues, political will, whatever you want to call it. But in this case, you give the will to drastically reduce foreign workers because allegedly foreign workers keep depressing the overall wage level, and therefore reducing them will improve demand for Malaysians, and they have to improve by way of raising wages. If we remove or reduce foreign workers altogether in a short period without the kind of planned conversion that you need to do, the economy will collapse. Because without them, the plantation worker will not be able to produce, construction will come to a standstill, and there is no replacement workers unless you raise all wages to that level. That will attract the incentives for labor to come in. So you know the labor supply curve is also backward bending at some point. You're way before that. That's not the issue. But the question is that Malaysian workers are not interested in this triple-D sectors as well as, in this case, construction and plantation. So there's nothing much we can do there. But the fact that we have double the official figure, party is actually what as big as the current registered workers. Yeah, it means that we are hitting, this is one of our weaknesses, basically. We are hitting a brick wall. And the idea of wages is not so much how many is below the PLI, but the living wage. And the living wage is actually above, it's slightly above even the minimum wage. I think one somebody, Razlan presented at the announcement of the DOTS HCIS survey, talk about the fact that the living wage is what we should be talking about. And it is the living wage is what we now, in MIER, we have a solution. We are going to announce it, and we have incorporated that into the paper to the Prime Minister. We are, at the moment, studying the, what we call the universal basic income approach to solving poverty. That is an extension of BRIM and PSH become a permanent feature of government budgeting or whatever is the source of income needed to finance a UBI or minimum guaranteed income, which is implemented in India, being expanded in California, in Finland, and a few other countries.
How does your living wage differ from the living wage of Bank Negara? They came up with a living wage, right?
I think more about the same. And that depends on the household size. We are recommending, we are not studying what is the impact of giving every adult 18 and above, every adult, in this case, all the way to the pensioners. Or we can reduce the burden, reduce it to maybe up to B50 or B60, and those above 65 or 60. To give them 500 per month ringgit or 1,000 per month ringgit. This effectively will raise the average level from above the PLI, because they still have their own jobs, they still get income, but we guarantee if they fall out, even if they are still employed, then 1,000 will be provided to the income. So we are raising effectively 1,000 across the board, for those classes of people, and that in effect also reduce the inequality measures and so on. But the question is, how can it be sustained fiscally? So we are still doing the numbers, but we also calculated the numbers and how much and where it can come from. In the West, they charge 1% surcharge on the top rate to finance their UBI. But that is now only a small experiment, not national. India has done it, and it became like the minimum wage. The UBI becomes a political issue. So a new government set different levels for it. But this is the solution to both the inequality, the poverty issue, the minimum wage issue as well. It has got some labor effects, but I think it has been proven by many cases that there is no disincentive to people being employed because they got 1,000 cash every month.
Thank you. That's very interesting ideas. I mean, I'll be looking forward to hearing more about these rather unconventional ideas about where to go. Yes, Isham.
It's always nice to see Dr. Muhammed, but he never fails to depress me. I don't know. Yeah, your solution argues for spending your way out of this problem. But if you remember the American case when they actually printed money and forced people to accept it, that was another issue. Right? But the banks actually took the money and they didn't let it out. So how is it to be specific? Where are you going to spend it so that actually the money doesn't just go to the rich and doesn't trickle down? So if you can be a little bit, so far you guys have been very general. Be a little bit more specific.
One more, yes, we have one more question.
Just a quick question. I'm just curious, isn't there anything from the government side that can target household debts instead of cashback policies? If we say that many of these households are in debt, any way to target those debts?
Major portion of the household debt is for mortgage payments, payment for hire purchase cars and other white goods, and some at the lower level, of course, due to the fact of emergencies, or even better, where they fall below put food on the table, they go to our loans and so on. So these are part of the problem that so there should be a way whereby, and in our Islamic economic model, we talk about how to deliver a credit system, a universal credit system. This is part of our solution as well. But there's no way you can use this to correct the debt that you are facing. Although under another part of the deal that we in fact have put under what is called the National Reset, Economic Reset Plan, which we are submitted to the Prime Minister. We will be presenting it to EPU. Yesterday we were meeting with Topa. We are going to get a session with the EPU side. The question is that a combination of some kind of capital recapitalization together with this UPI or Universal Basic Income, so that combination will allow us, and that scheme is already quite concrete and ready to be financed. And this is what we are waiting for the government to. We create something like what we call now, for convenience sake, the Agong's Trust, which is outside of the consolidated fund managed by the government, but more towards the third sector. But it is Agong's Trust that they can be initially capitalized and through a walk-up scheme, and that can be used to do this one-time correction of the debt of households. Because we studied even about 5 years ago when we studied for the UNDP project with Muhammed and Abdul. The poor have got no savings, for instance. They spend all that they have, and that level is the way in which they can maintain their standard of living or cost of living. So it is, we can calculate as much what is that deficit, and then we find an asset that can be monetized to another to generate the income. Part of it is, of course, by paying money, and that's a one-time under that scheme that we propose. There's a one-time recapitalization of household capital, so to speak, household spending power. That recapitalization can be paid through this excess money, extra money. And we have that scheme. They have made a proposal that calculated the cost and where to finance that cost.
Okay, so one part of it, the household debt, there is some kind of credit system, kind of an assurance system, coming also from the possibility of wealth institution. Spending your money out of it, banks don't give out the money, they take the money. So what do you do?
I did not mean with Kamal to make you depressed. It's not the intention.
Philosophers are always depressed. You know?
But I think it's important to share our views, and it's important to be honest. We should be comfortable to speak uncomfortable things. Yeah. On what should we spend? Two groups. The self-employed, we should give money to them, much easier again. And those who lost their job. Those who lost their job also mostly are from self-employed. They have no protection. If you look at SOCSO number, out of 100 self-employed, how many register with SOCSO? 3. Only 3, which means if they lose their job, they're not going to get employment insurance scheme. They get nothing. With subsidy, so you want to help. You help those very vulnerable, self-employed, and those who lost their job. And you can do it 2 ways. The best way, the optimal way, rather sustainable way. You just give. You already know who they are. You give PPN, but you only give one time. You continue that next 3 months. Remember, the economy is driven to consumer domestic demand. The biggest demand is this group. This group do not spend. Firms don't sell items, do not make profit, do not pay tax. So you need this demand and spend on this. But can we afford it? Yes, we can afford it. We did some calculation. I think we need about 25 billion. That's nothing. GDP 1.3 trillion. We can easily afford this. And I think if I read your question correctly, what you're trying to say, should we have we forgive debt? Is that what you're saying? Because now it's a low-income country that's been asking from World Bank and major economies is to forgive the debt.
No, my question is, wouldn't it be more efficient than cashback?
It's going to be tough because 50% of our debt is through mortgage, and usually from financial institution, not owned by the government, or it's private.
So the household debt, unfortunately, is much more complicated because it's to the private sector, to the banks rather than. So can the government take over some of this on behalf of people who are vulnerable? You have your, especially the schemes that are related to the government, or your Prima, these were all government schemes in the sense, but they went to the private sector. So maybe these would be the ones that you try to target to, to look into the idea that was seen as mentioned. Yeah. We have one more question from.
I mean, both of you were promoting a Keynesian solution, right? Keynesian solution is more of a big project solution. Building roads, building bridges.
Not necessarily you give money directly to the poor. It's
So
also
what's the
spending.
multiplier effect? So I mean, one is proposing actually building more roads, building more infrastructure. Hopefully that will trickle down. I don't think it will trickle down. I agree with what you say, but what's the multiplier effect? How does it get you out of? So you're just simply saying they consume, yes, for how long? How would you make them actually, in the end, be on their own feet? Someone like that.
The issue is not to make them to stand on their own feet, to ensure that they survive first.
Yes, yeah, of course.
That's the ultimate objective. The policies for so long for any government is to ensure in the end you do not depend on government assistance. But the immediate impact, why we should spend to ensure that they survive. That's the ultimate multiplier. It should not be our priority. How they have food on the table, that's the most important.
When you put the money into the country, obviously the multipliers will kick in, whether it is consumption multiplier or investment multiplier. So, I mean, again, you can go back to Keynesian fundamental theories. So that's not an issue of multiplier. You put people with money into their hand, they spend, that spending will cost through the simple process of NV equals PT. That would then drive the whole thing. The moment that the P part is increased and you manage the P, then the whole value will increase. That's how it works. I mean, this is fundamental economics. But the question is, when you want to inject funds, how do you make sure that through stabilization and so on, of course the bank have done it, how do you ensure that inflation are kept on the level? Because otherwise, there will runaway inflation will undermine the value of what injection. And so that goes to money and essentially increase of money supply without productivity growth. So you have to manage your injections carefully. When you say that we build roads, roads will create jobs. And then the people will spend if they got some income coming, and it's a steady, stable income. If you build houses, affordable houses, especially there's a pent-up demand for that. And if this, then those are still people who have got no houses and maybe no loans. So you have to also get the government to support maybe interest rate subsidy for the first down payments, as there was being done previously. But whether the reason why that kind of investment didn't work was because of politics. Politics of corruption, of leakages. 50% is estimated over the last 5 years. 50% of what the government spends is leaked out through the underground, through foreign workers' payment, wages and remittances, through even the new phenomenon of leakage through digital banking and international payment system. So that's the structural issue that you are being aware of, you have to understand. What we talk about the printing of money and the resources needed for it, you need to understand also what normal banking is not. Basically, that these are high finance. This is what drives the world monetary system. And this is what advanced countries have been doing based on those assets. And that's what we are trying to say. Can we now tap on some of those assets, bring back to our part of the world, maybe under an Islamic economic system, and then proceed to get the demand up through spending internally, especially for that short period. Our financing is only for 10 years. And then we get onto a kind of a platform, an escalator, then you rise, as any developed country will do. Even if your growth rate is only about 2 or 3%, you're already up in that level. Then those are really keeping the incentives going to spend by way of investment and consumption.
Thank you, Datuk. We just, there is one more question I'm told, Dr. Maya, from the list, is it that you feel that you would like to ask? But just before I give it to this question, I hope everybody will have a chance to read this article that was written by Jomo and his co-author, Vladimir Popov. Very interesting one, dead rats increase GDP. Yeah? It's about two academicians who are walking, and the older one tells the younger one, I'll give you $10,000 to eat that dead rat. And after doing cost-benefit analysis, the younger academic eats the rat. Agreed to eat the rat. And then, he feels bad. A little while later, he tells the older guy, I'll give you $10,000 if you eat the rat. And the other guy also agrees. So they both increase the GDP of the country by $20,000.
That's essentially the NPVT. That's the T effect. That's all this.
Yeah. And so I'm trying to relate it to the issues of public infrastructure. As somebody who's been living in certain parts of KL, Karamat area, they've been constantly digging for the last 3 years. They dig a hole, they cover it up, they dig a hole again. GDP increases. So it's what's keeping us moving. Okay, Dr. Maya, the question.
I think the last question from Adik Roslan. Yeah. Question to Dr. Muhammed. PKT, Zuckman and Salih have done extensive research on taxation, namely in wealth tax. In fact, they found it in the US that wealth of the top of 1% continued to grow in times of COVID-19. Even in Malaysia, we see some of our billionaires extend their wealth further during COVID-19. Is it favorable to induce more progressive taxation in Malaysia now to help finance the government revenue, and more importantly, use that money for welfare policies?
The answer is yes. The effective tax rate in Malaysia, the effective tax rate for the rich is quite low actually, because not all sources of income are treated equally. Wages, taxes, asset is not taxed. Even then, the proportion of people of the rich who pay tax is very little. You compare personal income tax of Malaysia to OECD countries, we are 1/4 of OECD countries in terms of personal income tax. And a lot of them do not pay tax. What you want first to ensure that they're in the net. In 2019, 2018, the government announced the immunity. You can bring back your money, we will not penalize you. About 260,000 Malaysian who have accounts overseas were sent letters, and the government collected about 10 million ringgit undeclared tax, just by ensuring that on internet you want to capture as many as possible on fair taxation. Yes, wealth tax is important and something that we should seriously consider. First thing that I think that the government did right then was to increase the personal income tax. Marginal top income tax increased to 30% when it announced, I think, 2018 budget. But compared to other high income countries or upper middle countries, that's still quite low. Why you do not want tax that penalizes the rich, but what you want is a fair taxation. Every source of income is taxed or taxed properly.
Any closing remarks?
Well, on taxes, we in fact in the UNDP study also recommended capital gains tax, and also looking at because of the overhang in property and so on, there was adopted bring back the 10% RPGT to a part of the fiscal exercises. But on the structure of the tax, basically we are in fact our tax system is still regressive, and you need to adjust that tax system. And but on the more important thing is the leakage. Our tax base has not grown as fast as it should as the economy grows. Tax buoyancy is maybe stagnant at this rate. So there is room for tax adjustments. But we give away too many allowances also. And those loopholes are what we should be looking at. And that includes high income player in terms of taxes. Now, I think somebody mentioned the CRP, Jomo mentioned about the new kinds of taxes, or smart taxes. We proposed once in Tobin as a basis, a global transaction tax. The financial flows are in fact tax as they go in and go out. And it's an instrument of fiscal policy as well. But this must be done on a global basis. It cannot be just done by one country. And on the income tax, on the indirect taxes, apart from the personal tax, the GST is an example of a flat tax, which is very fair. And Diamond and the Cambridge economists, there's a theorem which talks about how fair the flat consumption tax is, and that's the basis of VAT and GST. So we have to relook back at that kind of thing. That means that you consume, you pay what you consume. Or you consume less because you're poorer, maybe you pay less tax. But others, until the Lawrence curve kicks in, you will be able to generate your income, your taxes.
Closing comment?
Just to add two things. One on the tax one. We do not, a lot of rich people in Malaysia do not pay tax. The number is way too small. When Guan Eng announced increase of tax to 30%, he also mentioned a number which I think quite shocking. Only 2,000 Malaysians reported income more than 2 million ringgit. That's only 2,000. 2,000 Malaysians say they have income more than 2 million ringgit. The entire sales of BMW 5 Series also 2,000. 5 Series only. You had 3 Series, motorcycle, blah blah. BMW alone last year sold about 5,000 cars. And for Mercedes and for all the luxury vehicles. So a lot of people do not pay tax, avoid tax. Closing. A lot of students listening, yes? Okay. Okay. I think to ensure that the economy is sustainable, to ensure that it's inclusive, institution matters. You need institution, which means you need good laws and you need good people. The level of corruption or morally corrupt individuals somehow is seen been increasing. Young people in 2003, UKM did a study. 1 in 3 says, I don't mind receiving gifts or money in return for favors. And yesterday, MSAC chief revealed that about 50% of those caught for corruption aged below 40. So for universities, although there's no correlation between good education and better moral values, but I think being honest, principled, don't steal, don't even corrupt, not feudalism, not feudal mindset, not feudal system. I'm not questioning feudal system. UK has feudal system, Japan feudal system, Malaysia feudal system. But somehow we have very feudalistic mindset, including among students. We should not do that. Having higher education doesn't mean that you have had higher moral values. We've seen from one MDB case, the first CEO studied from Stanford, the thief studied in Wharton, the last CEO studied in LSE, in fact, and one of the directors studied in Harvard. But they're all crooks. So it's up to the young to have good moral values. And this also relates to who are your role model heroes. Do not worship those with money and call him boss or whatever. You should respect or adhere to those who have good moral values. You should judge a person based on his deeds or misdeeds, not his political party or his religion. I think that's important for the young, especially the graduates.
Thank you very much, Dr. Muhammad. Thank you very much, Dr. Kamal, for spending your afternoon with us. Certainly, it's been a very, I think a lot of input. It's recorded and it will be available for students and others to see. But I was just saying that we don't break any laws because this is educational institution. Secondly, it's on social media. So I was told that apparently social media is exempted from whatever laws. But we'll wait and see. Anyway, I think the idea of this session was to actually give us an opportunity to hear new ideas about how to get back on track, and we've had some very interesting ideas, and I must say some of these ideas the first time I'm hearing this. So it'll be interesting to maybe get to have sessions in the future when these ideas are taken up. You know, we'd like to hear a bit more, especially about how Islamic economics have played a role in this recovery plan and getting Malaysia back on track. Thank you all for staying. It's beyond the time, 15 minutes. And to everybody on the Zoom online, especially my class, whatever was said in this is examinable. It will be coming out in the next final assessment, final essay that you guys have to write. So hopefully you see the video a few times. Yeah? Once again, thank you all for staying here, and we look forward to the next session. Assalamualaikum.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you so much. I think the last statement, yeah, of making this relevant to the final assessment would definitely increase the number of viewers. Yeah, definitely, I'm sure. So thank you so much for being attentively listening to our lively session. Yeah, despite the fact that it's raining, this cold room turned out to be quite warm. Yeah, so let's end our session with Tasbih Kafarah Surat Al-As. Okay, before I forget, we do have a small token of appreciation for both of the speakers. So I would like to invite Prof. Aslam to pass on this.
I'm sure these are. Maybe they have already got their phone already.
The question is whether it's cashable.
Ah, is it cashable? Yes, but you have to give a high discount.
I thought you were given printed money.
I would have thought gold is a better one. Yeah,